been advocating for animals for many years as a volunteer with Animal Liberation SA, and in more recent years as an employee. Sally has hands-on experience working with animals as an employee at a busy boarding kennel and working with wildlife at the Minton Farm Rescue Sanctuary. Sally is also the SA candidate for the Animal Justice Party, so please join me in welcoming Sally to the microphone.
Thank you. I'd just like to say first that we're standing here in solidarity with all the victims of the BSL, both the dogs themselves and the families who suffer and at times lose a valued family member who's done nothing except be identified by very dubious means as being a certain breed. I represent Animal Liberation and the Animal Justice Party, and both of these organisations oppose breed-specific legislation based on the overwhelming sound research that concludes that it is not an effective way of preventing dog bites, fights, aggression, attacks, etc. I'll just give you a few of my personal experiences. Like the intro said, I did work in boarding kennels for a while. Some time ago, I worked in very busy boarding kennels, and we used to get a lot of dogs there also that were being, their owners were going through the courts because of attacks and whatnot. I came into a contact with so many breeds, different breeds over that time, dogs and cats, and this included many of the so-called dangerous breeds, the Mastiffs, German Shepherds, Rottweilers and the Pit Bulls, etc. And at the same time I also came into contact with Maltese, Chihuahua, Toy Poodles, funnily enough, the owner of the kennels, who had been working in the industry for about 30 years, said the only dog bite he'd ever received was from a Toy Poodle. Went right through his finger. If you know Toy Poodles, it's very hard to get to know them if you're not their owner. They're one person sort of dogs. So I never really had any fear of any dogs, as I'd lived comfortably with them for most of my life. And I can remember two particular pit bulls that were there for an extended period of time, called Sabbath and Bear. They were both family dogs. They belonged to families with very young children, and there was no issue with them. I used to see the children interact with these dogs, and it was beautiful. And the reason for that is because the children, as well as the dogs, had been educated. The children knew exactly what to do and what not to do with these dogs. And this is the same with any dog, even if you had a Maltese. In fact, Maltese are not that great with children. If you pull a dog's tail enough times, it's going to react. So you've got to train the children. And that includes people that don't even have dogs. You know, there needs to be education in our society about children approaching dogs. My little dog up there that Amanda's got is a little Chihuahua, and kids will just come running up and want to pat her on the head, and that scares her a little bit. Now, she wouldn't bite anyone personally, she's just not that type of dog, but not every dog's like that. So children need to be educated, and the community needs to educate everyone on how to deal with with all animals. Yeah, so I've never been bitten by any dog, except my own. I'll tell you about that later. And the reason for this is because with a lot of the dangerous, so-called dangerous breeds, in the boarding kennels, they're in quite confined areas, and some of them aren't used to being confined like that. So you have to know what you're doing with your body language to come in and not be bitten by them. And every single dog, including the ones that were there being held at that time while the owners were going through court, I got to know and made friends with and got quite attached to. The only ones I couldn't bring around were the Toy Poodles and some of the Chihuahuas who...
We're getting every noise, aircraft, ambulance, big bus.
Who we just gave up on each other after a while and just kept our distance and just, yeah, it was a standoff basically. So BSL is fundamentally flawed as it removes the responsibility for dog biting from the dog owners and places the blame on the dogs. And this has always been my issue with dogs being euthanased for even behaviour that's not acceptable, is that it's not the dog's fault. Really, it's the dog's fault. It's the owner's fault. Owners need to be trained, dogs need to be rehabilitated. So BSL is a very oversimplistic solution, or so-called solution, to a very complex problem. There's a really good example of how to deal with dogs in communities in Calgary in Canada. Calgary has no BSL, and the level of dog attacks there has fallen despite this fact. In the past 20 years, the human and dog population of Calgary has doubled, and the incidence of dog bites and chases has fallen by 75%. Further to this, the pit bull population has increased while dog bites have decreased. So how have they achieved this? There's a really good website called Stop Canine Profiling, and they put out basically a Calgary do's and Calgary don'ts. So I'll just go through them. So the Calgary do's provide valuable service rather than simply punishing citizens into compliance, buy-in cooperation among community stakeholders, have extensive education and PR campaign to emphasise responsible pet ownership, have low licence fees and modest differential fees for intact pets, and have anti-tethering laws. The Calgary do nots are enforce mandatory spay-neuter, enforce breed-specific legislation, and enforce pet limit laws. Yep. In 2001, the American Veterinary Medical Association formed a task force to examine many aspects of canine dog behaviour. In a published paper, A Community Approach to Dog Bite Prevention, the task force stated clearly that there was no statistical, biological or behavioural evidence that any breed of dog was more vicious or more dangerous than others. BSL is misguided and a knee-jerk reaction to the problem of aggressive behaviour in dogs. Most research does not support BSL as a solution. In fact, if anything, it makes the problem worse. Animal Liberation does not support BSL, and if it were introduced into SA, we will campaign against it. The Animal Justice Party also does not support BSL. We're opposed to breed-specific legislation and will seek to strike down such laws based on the fact that the legislation is unfair, unjust and ineffective. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sally. Bob Yao from Canine Detection Services is going to be our next speaker. Bob has 17 years experience as a dog trainer and handler with the Corrections Dog Squad, and he's accredited in dog management. Bob has been training dogs for 24 years and now runs his own dog training business, Canine Detection Services, which trains dogs for security industry, specifically for detection and patrol. Bob also trains dogs for a charity called Canine Companions, who trains and supplies dogs to assist disabled people, and mainly children. Bob also trains pet dogs and their owners in obedience and behavioural problems. He is vehemently opposed to BSL, and he's going to speak to us today about the alternative to BSL, that's responsible dog ownership. Please welcome Bob to the microphone.
I won't go too far or any further into the BSL. There's going to be enough mention about that, I believe, today. There already has been, and there'll be a bit more yet, I would say. I have been training dogs for 24 years now. I've got to say, in those 24 years, I've seen 2 dogs that I would not trust and place with anybody else. The vast majority of dogs can be rehomed. The vast majority, and I'm talking 90-odd%. In my experience, and it's not only my experience, but a lot of other trainers too. And I have spoken to other trainers regarding the BSL, and there's not one that is in favour. Not one. Okay. Responsible ownership. Well, I believe that starts before you get your dog. If you research the dog you want first, and get the dog that is best suited to your situation. If you go ahead and get a cattle dog, or a dog such as the Belgian Malinois, very high breed, very high energy, and they're very high drive, then you're going to have trouble if you're living in a townhouse or a yard with a small back garden and you haven't got anywhere to exercise and you don't take the dog out. If you're the sedentary type of person that likes to sit in and watch the TV most of the day, those dogs are not going to get the exercise they need. Therefore, in my view, it's not responsible ownership. These dogs do need exercise, plenty of exercise, and I know the Malinois will actually turn on the handler and the owner if they don't get what is required of them, which is a lot of work. They're an excellent breed of dog, but they do need to go to the right owner. Likewise with the working dogs, they do need the exercise. So I would encourage all people to research first and get the dog that best suits your home situation and also your energy levels. I'm getting on a bit now, as you may or may not notice. I'm not going to go and get my dog that's going to run me off my legs now. I'm going to get a dog that's a bit quieter. And as for the dangerous dog breed, I've had several Rottweilers. I've had quite a number of German Shepherds with my working and my own pet dogs. I haven't had one yet with a bad temperament, not one. I may have been very lucky. I'd like to think it's because of the way I treat my dogs. The majority of dogs that are aggressive are not born aggressive. They're not born aggressive. Dogs aren't born aggressive in my view. They are actually made that way by the owners. And that's what needs addressing, not the dog. Well, obviously the dog needs retrained, as has been said before. Okay, if you're going to get a dog, make sure your property, look at your own property, make sure it's secure for the type of dog you've got. You can't get over the fence, under the fence, through the fence or on the gate. Okay, you don't want to be escaping, particularly if you've got one of the breeds that are deemed to be a dangerous dog, because we know what happens to those. One thing I will also mention is a lot of people treat their dogs as a little human being or another human being. Now, we all love our dogs, love them to bits, but the more you treat your dog as a human, the more that dog's going to treat you as a dog. That's the way they are. But obviously they're lovely animals and we do love them. I mean, look at that. Beautiful, isn't it? Okay. Where are we now? The other thing, of course, obviously for responsible dog ownership, if he's going to sleep outside, he needs good kenneling, he needs shade for the sun in the summer. A good diet is another good thing. You don't want them being overweight. That can cause problems, as we know. And as soon as you get your dog home, even with a puppy, I start training and setting boundaries straight away. Okay? They're not allowed to run all over the place. They're not allowed to knock my kids over. Not that mine are young anymore. And my grandchildren, they're not allowed to do that. They don't sleep on the beds. They don't sit up on the couch with me. However, I still love my dogs, and I think they still love me. More so than my wife, I guess. But she's got good reason not to, I suppose, at times. So set your boundaries, start the training straight away, then you'll get control. Dogs also need lead walking. A lot of people say, well, I've got a big backyard and the dog gets out. He runs around the backyard. He still needs that lead walking, because then that also helps you gain control of the dog, and it also learns that you are the boss too. He walks by your side, he doesn't pull you all over the place, etc. And that walking is another good bonding time as well. So your dogs do need to get out and walk. You meet people on the street that want to pat your dog, I don't let them pat my dog. People come up, and I've seen it today, they'll come up, they'll offer their hand. You may well be offering some dog a bone. Not all dogs are going to bite, some will. Pat them on the head. A lot of dogs don't like that. A lot of people bend straight over the dog. You don't want them doing that. Sooner than people approach my dog, I let my dog approach the person. If someone asks if they want to pat my dog, if my dog goes up to them and he's happy with them, fine, they can. If the dog turns away and doesn't want to know them, then they don't come near the dog. I've got a beautiful Rottweiler, a lick you to death, but I'm not going to have him bite someone because they bend over him and in his view threaten them. And a lot of dogs don't like to be stealing their space. So I wouldn't let people, personally, I don't let people come up and pat my dog. If the dog were to say wants it to go to them, then that's fine. Okay then, we're running out of time already. I haven't gone through all I want to go through, but I do have a Facebook page, Canine Detection Service, and I'll be putting the rest of it up on there. I'll put it all up on there if anybody's interested in seeing that later. I'd like to thank you all for turning out today too.
Thanks very much.